Him. Sharp jawline, impeccable suit. The kind of man magazines called self-made. Though few knew how much of his empire had been built on her quiet sacrifices. Isabel had sold her grandmother's pearls to fund his first real estate bid. She'd stayed up nights editing his pitch decks while he slept. And when the deals started closing, when the headlines began shouting his name, she'd stepped back without complaint, saying, "This is your moment, Lucas. Shine." But now she was just gone. From his bed, from his life, from the glossy society pages that once called them the golden couple. His phone buzzed on the marble counter. A text from Vanessa, "Don't forget, gala's in 2 weeks. We need to look perfect." He exhaled through his nose, a dry, humorless sound. Perfect. That's what Vanessa cared about. Appearances, status. The way photographers leaned in when she laughed. The way investors' eyes lingered when she crossed a room in one of those tight, backless dresses he'd bought her. Isabel never wore dresses like that. She preferred soft cotton, books in her lap, her hair pulled into a messy bun. She'd hum while making coffee. She'd kiss his forehead when he worked late. Not to seduce, but to say, "I'm here." "Mr. Valente?" His assistant's voice crackled through the intercom. "The board is waiting for your call. Tell them I'll be right there," he said, his voice smooth, controlled. The voice of a man who owned boardrooms and private jets and never, ever lost control. But inside, something had cracked the day he'd told Isabel it was over. He remembered it too clearly. Rain tapping against the windows of their old brownstone. The one she'd picked out, the one with the garden she'd planted rosemary in. "For cooking," she'd said with that quiet smile. He'd stood in the doorway, coat already on, suitcase by his feet, and said, "It's not you, Isabel. It's just, I need something more." She hadn't cried. Not then. She just looked at him. Really looked, and whispered, "You already had everything, Lucas. You just didn't know how to hold it." And then she'd closed the door. He told himself it was freedom. A new chapter. But freedom, he was learning, felt a lot like emptiness dressed in silk. Downstairs, the city roared on, oblivious. Billionaires rose and fell. Stocks surged and crashed. But up here, in this glass tower of his making, Lucas Valente, the man who owned everything, felt the chilling truth settle in his bones. He traded something real for something shiny, and he wasn't sure he could get it back. Not that he deserved to. He finally took a sip of the whiskey. It burned, but not as much as the memory of his daughter's voice the last time he'd visited. Small, confused, asking, "Daddy, why don't you live with us anymore?" He hadn't known what to say, so he'd said nothing at all. And that, perhaps, was the loudest answer of all. Certo, agora tu como narrador e storyteller desenvolva a historia sem marcacos com o nome de cada tópico que for desenvolve. Mi conti sobrio tópico tu com dialogo como su fosso espectador. Sempre lembrando de desenvolver com vida moco. Com os sentimentos de forma que a estrutura de narrativa utiliza uma linha temporal linear de modo o espectador sentir o que o personagem está sentindo amigos. Com 6.000 characters when 3 max rain tapped against the window pane like quiet, please, soft, persistent, ignored. Inside the small house on the edge of the city, Isabel sat at the kitchen table, her fingers wrapped around a chipped mug of tea long gone cold. The room smelled of lavender soap and old paperbacks, of the life she'd rebuilt from the rubble of a love she once thought unshakable. Across from her, 4-year-old Laura colored with fierce concentration, her tongue poking out the corner of her mouth, crayon scratching against paper. "Look, Mama," she said, holding up a drawing of 3 stick figures, 2 tall, 1 small, holding hands under a lopsided sun. "That's us, you, me, and Daddy." Isabel's breath caught. She forced a smile, gentle, careful, like handling glass. "It's beautiful, sweetheart." But inside, her chest tightened like a fist. "Daddy." The word still felt like a splinter under her skin. She remembered the last time Lucas had visited, 6 weeks ago. He'd brought expensive toys Laura didn't ask for and stayed exactly 43 minutes. He'd asked about school, about her favorite foods, about cartoons, safe, distant questions that skirted the real one. "Do you miss me?" Laura had nodded shyly. Isabel had said nothing. Now, the silence between visits stretched longer each time, like elastic pulled too thin. She glanced at the stack of medical bills on the counter, highlighted in yellow, circled in red. The cardiologist's note lay on top: mitral valve prolapse. Surgery recommended within 3 months. Estimated cost, $87,000. Her savings were gone. The tutoring jobs barely covered rent. She'd sold her wedding ring months ago. Diamond gone. Band kept hidden in a drawer. Not out of hope, but because throwing it away felt like erasing Laura's beginning. "Mama!" Laura's voice pulled her back. "Why doesn't Daddy come on Sundays like he used to?" Isabel swallowed hard. She knelt beside her daughter, brushing a curl from her forehead. "Sometimes grown-ups get confused, baby. But that doesn't mean he doesn't love you. Then why did he leave us?" The question hung in the air, simple and devastating. Isabel's eyes burned. She wanted to rage, to scream that he left because he traded 12 years of loyalty for a woman half his age who laughed too loudly at his jokes. She wanted to say he left because power and pride had hollowed him out until he couldn't recognize love when it was right in front of him. But Laura didn't need that truth. Not yet. So Isabel kissed her temple and whispered, "He made a mistake, but you're perfect, and I'll always be here." Later that night, after tucking Laura into bed, after singing the same lullaby she'd sung since infancy, after smoothing the blanket 3 times, Isabel stood in the hallway, leaning against the wall, tears finally spilling over. She missed the woman she used to be, the one who believed in forever, who quoted Rilke over morning coffee, who thought love was enough. Now, love felt like a language she no longer spoke. But then, from the bedroom, Laura murmured in her sleep, "Mama?" And Isabel straightened, wiped her cheeks, took a breath, because love wasn't just a feeling. It was a choice, a daily, relentless act of showing up, even when your heart was in pieces. The next morning, a thick envelope arrived in the mail. Elegant cream paper, gold-embossed lettering. "You are cordially invited to the annual Valente Foundation Gala." Her name was printed at the top. She knew it was a mistake. Someone in Lucas's office must have used the old guest list. But as she held the invitation, her fingers trembling, a thought flickered, dangerous and desperate. What if I go? Not for him, never for him, but for Laura, for the surgery, for the chance to look him in the eye and say, "Your daughter needs you, not your money. You." She stared at her reflection in the hallway mirror, hair pulled back, dark circles under her eyes, wearing yesterday's sweater with a loose thread at the cuff. She looked tired, worn, but not broken. No, not broken, because broken things don't fight. And Isabel? She would fight until her last breath for the child who still drew pictures of a family that no longer existed. But maybe, just maybe, could be she stopped in front of the full-length mirror, adjusting the strap of her dress for the gala, emerald green backless designed to make every head turn. And it would. It always did. But tonight, something gnawed at her. "Lucas," she called, voice sharp enough to cut glass. "Have you confirmed the seating chart? I don't want any surprises." He stood by the window again, phone in hand, distant. "It's handled." "Handled how?" She turned, eyes narrowed. "Because I heard a rumor. Ridiculous, I know. But someone said Isabel might show up." A beat of silence. Too long. Lucas didn't look at her. "She wouldn't." "You sure about that?" Vanessa stepped closer, heels clicking like a metronome counting down to disaster. "Because if she does, if she drags that child into our night, it'll look like you're still tied to her. Like you're weak." "I'm not weak," he said, voice low, but there was a tremor beneath it. "Aren't you?" She laughed, but it was brittle. "You left her, Lucas. Clean break. No alimony drama, no custody battles, just gone. So why does she still have your name? Why does your daughter call you Daddy, like you're some hero who tucks her in every night?" He finally turned. "Because I am her father." "Then act like it." Vanessa snapped, then instantly softened. sliding a hand up his chest. Or better yet, act like the man you are now, the tycoon, the future, not some sentimental fool haunted by a woman who couldn't even keep you interested. He flinched almost imperceptibly, but she saw it. She leaned in, lips brushing his ear. Tonight is about us, our future. The investors, the press, the board, they're all watching. Don't let a ghost ruin it. He didn't answer, just stared past her, toward the city lights, as if searching for something he'd lost in the glow. Later, in the car on the way to the gala, Vanessa scrolled through her phone, smirking at a text from someone named M. Lucas noticed but said nothing. He'd learned not to ask. Not after the first time he'd questioned a late-night call and she'd laughed. Jealous? Of me? Please. You're lucky I chose you over half the men in this town. But tonight, something felt different. The air between them was charged not with passion, but with performance. Every touch was calculated, every smile rehearsed. At the hotel entrance, photographers shouted their names. Lucas, Vanessa, over here. Flashbulbs exploded like tiny supernovas. She beamed, arm looped through his, head tilted just so, perfection engineered for consumption. Inside, the ballroom glittered, crystal chandeliers, string quartet, guests dripping in diamonds and desperation. Vanessa greeted everyone with practiced warmth, but her grip on Lucas's arm tightened whenever someone mentioned family or legacy. You're tense, he murmured during a lull in the crowd. I'm focused, she corrected, scanning the room like a general surveying a battlefield. This gala raises millions. One misstep and your reputation takes a hit, and mine with it. He almost said, since when did you care about my reputation? But he held his tongue, because deep down, he knew the truth. Vanessa didn't love him. She loved what he represented, the access, the power, the name that opened doors. And maybe that was all he deserved. Still, as the night wore on, a quiet dread coiled in his gut. He kept glancing toward the grand staircase, the same one Isabel used to descend in that navy blue dress she wore to their first charity event. The one she'd sewn herself because designer gowns are overrated. He shook his head. She's not coming. She wouldn't. But then, a hush rippled through the crowd near the entrance. He turned, and there she was, Isabel, standing on the top step of the grand staircase. Not in silk or sequins, but in a simple ivory dress, hair loose, eyes steady. And in her hand, small, trusting, clutching her mother's fingers, was Laura. Time didn't just slow, it shattered. Vanessa followed his gaze. Her breath hitched. No, she whispered. No, no, no. She grabbed his arm hard enough to bruise. Don't you dare go to her. But Lucas wasn't listening. All he could see was his daughter, his child, looking around the glittering room with wide, uncertain eyes, searching for him. And in that moment, the carefully constructed world of Vanessa's making. The she'd spent 3 nights awake, staring at the ceiling, rehearsing what she'd say. Not begging, never begging, but asking clearly, calmly, as one parent to another. And so, on the evening of the gala, she dressed Laura in a soft pink dress with tiny white flowers, brushed her hair until it shone, and knelt to look her in the eyes. Tonight, we're going to a big party, sweetheart, she'd said, voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. Daddy will be there. Laura's face lit up. Will he dance with me? Isabel's throat tightened. I don't know, baby, but I'll be right beside you. Always. Now, standing at the top of the grand staircase, the weight of every gaze in the room pressing down on her like a physical force, Isabel wished she'd worn armor instead of this simple dress. The air smelled of expensive perfume and champagne, a world away from the lavender soap and crayon wax of her kitchen. Below, Lucas stood frozen, his face unreadable. But his eyes were wide, raw, as if he'd seen a ghost. And beside him, Vanessa's smile had vanished, replaced by a glare so sharp it could draw blood. Isabel took a breath, then another. She squeezed Laura's hand. Ready? Laura nodded, though her small fingers trembled. Is that him, Mama? Is that Daddy? Yes, Isabel whispered. That's him. They began to descend. Each step echoed like a heartbeat. The murmur of the crowd grew. Hushed, curious, cruel. She heard a woman whisper, "Isn't that the wife he left?" Another chuckled, "Bold move, showing up like this." But Isabel kept walking. Not for them, not even for Lucas, for Laura. Halfway down, Lucas finally moved. He stepped forward, breaking free from Vanessa's grip. She hissed something under her breath, but he didn't turn back. He met them at the third step from the bottom. For a moment, no one spoke. The music played on, distant and meaningless. The only sound was Laura's quiet breath. Then, softly, Isabel said, "I didn't come to cause a scene." His voice was rough, barely above a whisper. "Then why are you here?" "Because she needs you." She shifted slightly, letting Laura step forward just enough to be seen. "Not your money. You." Lucas's gaze dropped to his daughter. Laura looked up at him, eyes huge, lips parted. "Hi, Daddy." His expression fractured. Just for a second, but Isabel saw it. The guilt, the longing, the fear. Before he could respond, Vanessa appeared at his side like a shadow, all practiced grace and poison. "Oh, Isabel," she cooed, voice dripping with false sympathy. "How brave of you to come. Though I'm sure you understand, this isn't really the place for personal matters." Isabel met her eyes, calm as still water. "It's the perfect place. Everyone who matters is watching." Vanessa's smile tightened. "What do you want?" "I want him to look at his daughter," Isabel said, voice rising just enough to carry. "I want him to see that she's scared, that she asks for him in her sleep, that she drew you a picture last week and kept it under her pillow because she was too nervous to give it to you." Lucas flinched. Vanessa's eyes flickered with panic. She leaned in, lowering her voice to a venomous whisper only Isabel could hear. "You think showing up with the kid makes you noble? You're just embarrassing him. And her." Isabel didn't blink. Better to be embarrassed than absent. The words hung in the air like a challenge. Lucas finally spoke, voice strained. "Isabel, let's talk somewhere private." "There's nothing private about what she needs," she said. "Not anymore." Laura, sensing the tension, tugged Isabel's hand. "Mama, I'm thirsty." The simple request broke the spell. Isabel knelt, pulling a small water bottle from her purse, because of course she'd come prepared, and handed it to her daughter. The gesture was so ordinary, so maternal, that it cut through the glittering artifice of the gala like a knife. Lucas watched, silent, as his daughter drank, as Isabel gently wiped a drop from her chin. And in that moment, he saw not the woman he'd left behind, but the woman who'd never stopped being a mother, who'd carried their child through every storm he'd created. Vanessa grabbed his arm again, nails digging in. "Lucas, the donors are waiting. The speech is in 10 minutes. He didn't pull away, but his eyes never left Isabel. "I'll be right back," he said to her, voice thick. Isabel gave a small nod. Not hopeful, not trusting, just waiting, because she knew the real test wasn't whether he'd speak to her tonight. It was whether he'd show up tomorrow, and the night after that, and the 1,000 ordinary days that make a father. As Lucas turned toward the stage, Vanessa shooting Isabel one last venomous look over her shoulder. Laura tugged her sleeve again. "Mama!" "Yes." She watched Lucas take the stage, Vanessa at his side like a trophy, polished to perfection. The crowd applauded as he adjusted the microphone, his voice calm, commanding, the Tycoon in full armor again. But Isabel saw what no one else did. The slight tremor in his fingers, the way his eyes flickered toward the staircase every few seconds. "He looks sad," Laura whispered, tugging her sleeve. Isabel's breath hitched. People can look sad even when they're pretending not to be. Is he pretending? She didn't answer right away. How could she explain to a 4-year-old that the man on that stage had traded love for illusion, and now didn't know how to find his way back? Instead, she knelt, smoothing Laura's dress. "Do you want to go home?" Laura shook her head. "I want to hear Daddy talk." So they stayed. But as Lucas began his speech, polished lines about vision, legacy, and building a better future. Isabel felt something crack inside her, because none of those words included her. None included Laura, and certainly none included the nights she'd spent alone, rocking a feverish child, wondering if the man who gave her half her DNA even remembered her middle name. Vanessa leaned into him during the applause, whispering something that made him stiffen. He nodded, but his gaze drifted again, this time locking with Isabel's across the room. For a heartbeat, the noise faded. It was just them, and the child between them. Then Vanessa tugged his arm, steering him toward a group of investors. The moment shattered. Isabel turned away, blinking fast. She wouldn't cry. Not here. Not where they could watch her break. But Laura sensed it. She wrapped her small arms around Isabel's neck. "Don't be sad, Mama. I love you most." The words undid her. She held her daughter close, breathing in the scent of her shampoo, strawberries and innocence, and whispered into her hair, "I love you more than all the stars, baby. More than anything." Later, during the dessert course, a waiter approached with 2 glasses of sparkling water. No champagne, just as she'd hoped. "Compliments of Mr. Valente," he said quietly. Isabel accepted them, heart pounding. A small gesture, but it meant he'd remembered. She'd once told him years ago that she hated champagne. It gave her headaches. He'd laughed and said, "Noted. Water it is, my queen." She hadn't heard that nickname in years. Now, as she handed 1 glass to Laura, her fingers brushed the condensation, cold and real. She looked toward the terrace doors, slightly ajar, and saw Lucas step outside, alone. Her pulse quickened. "Stay here for just a minute, okay?" she told Laura, pointing to a quiet bench near the string quartet. "I'll be right back." Laura nodded, already distracted by the violinist's bow. Isabel walked toward the terrace, each step heavier than the last. The night air was cool, scented with jasmine from the hotel gardens. Lucas stood at the railing, back to her, shoulders tense. "I didn't think you'd come," he said without turning. "I didn't think I'd have to," she replied. He finally faced her. Moonlight caught the lines around his eyes, new lines, deeper than before. "You look tired," she almost laughed. "For years of single motherhood will do that." "I could have helped," he said quietly. "You never asked." "Because I didn't want your money," she said, voice trembling now. "I wanted you to see us, to choose us, not out of guilt, not out of obligation, but because you couldn't imagine your life without her." He looked down. "I didn't know how to come back. You didn't try." Silence stretched between them, thick with everything unsaid. Then softly, "Is the surgery soon?" 3 weeks, she whispered. "If we can afford it." He closed his eyes. "I'll pay for it, all of it." She shook her head. "That's not the point, Lucas." "Then what is?" "That you show up after," she said, tears finally spilling. "That you're there when she wakes up scared. That you help her with her homework. That you remember she's allergic to strawberries. That you stay." He stepped closer. "I want to." "Do you?" Her voice broke. "Or do you just want to ease your conscience?" He didn't answer right away. Instead, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper, crumpled, worn at the edges. He handed it to her. She opened it. It was Laura's drawing, the one of the 3 stick figures under the sun. "I found it in my car," he said, voice rough. "I've kept it in my jacket ever since." Isabel stared at the childish lines, the wobbly sun, the hearts above their heads. Her vision blurred. Before she could speak, the terrace door opened. Vanessa stood there, arms crossed, eyes blazing. "There you are," she said, voice icy. "The board is waiting. And your guest," she glanced at Isabel with contempt, "has overstayed her welcome." Lucas didn't look at her. He kept his eyes on Isabel. "Go back to Laura," he said gently. "I'll find you before you leave." Vanessa scoffed. "Don't be ridiculous." But Lucas turned to her, calm, final. "Give us a minute." For the first time, Vanessa looked uncertain. She opened her mouth, then shut it. With a sharp click of her heels, she disappeared inside. Isabel wiped her cheeks. She won't let this go. No, he admitted. She won't. Isabel's chest ached. She knelt beside her, smoothing a stray curl behind Laura's ear. Did you miss me? Laura nodded, then leaned into her, small and trusting. The music sounds like stars falling. Isabel smiled through the tightness in her throat. It does. But the peace was short-lived. Across the room, Vanessa stood near the champagne fountain, speaking in low, urgent tones to a man in a tailored navy suit, someone Isabel recognized from business magazines. Marcus Thorne, Lucas's biggest rival. Vanessa's hand rested on his forearm, laughing at something he said. Her body angled toward him like a compass needle pointing away from north. From Lucas, Isabel's stomach dropped. She'd seen that look before, the performative intimacy, the calculated flirtation. It wasn't just jealousy, it was strategy. Vanessa wasn't just securing her place in Lucas's life. She was hedging her bets. And Lucas? He was still on the terrace, unaware. Mama! Laura tugged her sleeve. Can we go home now? My feet hurt. Soon, sweetheart, Isabel murmured, scanning the room for him. As if summoned, Lucas reappeared through the terrace doors. His expression was different now, resolved, almost grim. He moved with purpose, cutting through the crowd like a man who'd made a decision and wouldn't be swayed. But Vanessa saw him too. She excused herself from Marcus with a lingering touch and glided toward Lucas, intercepting him before he could reach Isabel. Her voice was honey laced with poison. You're making a scene. People are talking. Let them talk, he said, not breaking stride. She grabbed his arm. Don't be naive. If you walk over there, you're choosing her over everything we've built. We haven't built anything, he said quietly. You built an image. I just stood in front of it. Her eyes flashed. And what will you have if you throw it all away for a woman who can't even afford her own dress? He stopped, turned to her fully. I'll have my daughter. The words landed like a gavel. Vanessa's mask slipped, just for a second, and Isabel saw it. Panic. Because she knew, as clearly as Isabel did, that once Lucas truly saw Laura, there would be no going back. He walked on. The crowd parted instinctively, sensing the shift in the air. Conversations hushed. Eyes followed him like moths to a flame. Isabel stood, pulling Laura close. Lucas stopped a few feet away. He didn't speak at first, just looked at his daughter, really looked, at the way her hair caught the light, at the tiny bandage on her knee from a fall last week, at the way she clung to Isabel's hand like it was the only thing keeping her grounded in a world too big, too bright. Then slowly he knelt, not for show, not for the cameras, but because he needed to be at her level. Hey, Bug, he said, voice rough with emotion. Laura blinked. You called me that before. I did. A faint smile touched his lips. Because you're small, but you light up everything. Tears welled in Laura's eyes. Will you come to my birthday? His breath caught. When is it? Next month. You missed last year. I know, he whispered. I'm so sorry. Isabel watched, heart in her throat, as Lucas reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Not jewelry, but a tiny silver music box. He'd bought it weeks ago, she realized. He'd been planning to give it. He just hadn't known how. He opened it. A soft, tinkling version of Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star filled the space between them. Laura gasped. For me. For you, he said. Every time you hear it, know that I'm thinking of you, even when I'm not there. Isabel's vision blurred. This wasn't the grand gesture of a tycoon. This was the quiet, trembling offering of a father trying to stitch himself back into his child's life, one fragile note at a time. Vanessa watched from the edge of the room, arms crossed, face pale. She knew she'd lost. Not just him, but the future she'd so carefully engineered. Lucas stood, turning to Isabel. I'll handle everything. The surgery, the doctors. I'll be there the day of the procedure. And after, she searched his eyes. Why now? Because I finally remembered what matters, he said. Not power, not image, her. Isabel nodded slowly. Not forgiveness. Not yet, but acknowledgement. As they turned to leave, Laura holding the music box like a sacred relic, the gala seemed to fade behind them. Its glitter, its whispers, its hollow grandeur. Outside, the city breathed in the cool night air, indifferent to the quiet revolution that had just taken place on a marble staircase. She hadn't called a cab. She needed to walk, to breathe, to let the weight of what had just happened settle into something real. But before she'd gone 10 steps, a voice cut through the stillness. Isabel. She stopped, didn't turn. Lucas stood a few feet behind her, coat unbuttoned, tie loosened, looking less like a tycoon and more like a man who just survived a storm. "I'll drive you home," he said. She shook her head. "We're fine. You shouldn't walk alone this late." "I've walked alone for months," she said quietly. "I'm used to it." He flinched as if struck, then stepped closer, voice low, raw. "I know, and that's on me." She finally turned. Moonlight caught the exhaustion in his eyes, the kind that no amount of money could fix. "Why now, Lucas? Why tonight? Was it guilt? Pity? Or did you just finally get tired of pretending Vanessa was enough?" He didn't look away. It was seeing her on those stairs. "Laura?" "No," his voice cracked. "You," holding her hand like you always did, like you never stopped being her anchor, even when I vanished. Isabel's throat tightened. She looked down at Laura's peaceful face. "I didn't have a choice. She needed me. I was supposed to need her too," he whispered. "But I got lost in the noise. The deals, the image, the lie that success meant never looking back." A silence stretched between them, filled only by Laura's soft breathing. Then, from the shadows near the hotel entrance, high heels clicked sharply against stone. Vanessa. She stood with her arms crossed, designer clutch dangling from one hand, face taut with fury barely contained. "So this is how it ends? You just walk away with them like some tragic hero?" Lucas turned. "It's not an ending, Vanessa. It's a correction." She let out a bitter laugh. "Don't flatter yourself. You think she wants you back? After everything you've done? She's using you for the surgery. That's all." Isabel's grip on Laura tightened, but her voice stayed calm. "I didn't come for money. I came because my daughter asked for her father. There's a difference." Vanessa's eyes narrowed. "Oh, spare me the martyr act. You showed up at his event, in his world, holding his child like a prop. Don't pretend this was noble." "It wasn't noble," Isabel said, stepping forward, voice trembling now with quiet fire. "It was necessary, because you two built a life on appearances, and I had to make sure he remembered what's real." Vanessa opened her mouth to retort, but Lucas cut in, voice firm, final. "Enough." He turned to Isabel. "Let me drive you, please." She hesitated. Every instinct screamed caution. But then Laura stirred in her sleep, murmuring, "Daddy?" And something in Lucas's face broke open. Pure, unguarded love, mixed with regret so deep it looked like grief. Isabel nodded once. He led them to his car, a sleek black sedan, silent and waiting. He opened the back door, then gently took Laura from Isabel's arms, cradling her like something sacred. Isabel watched, heart pounding, as he buckled her in with surprising tenderness, tucking the music box beside her. As they pulled away from the hotel, the city lights streaking past the windows, Isabel sat in the passenger seat, arms wrapped around herself. "You kept her drawing," she said after a long silence. "In my jacket pocket," he admitted. "Every day." "Why?" "Because it was the only thing that reminded me I was still someone's father, even when I acted like I wasn't." She looked out the window. "She talks about you, all the time. She made you a birthday card last month. I didn't send it. I didn't know if you'd care." "I care," he said, voice thick. "God, Isabel, I care more than I know how to say." They rode in silence for several blocks, the only sound Laura's soft breaths from the back seat. Then, softly, Isabel asked, "What happens tomorrow?" He didn't answer right away. When he did, his voice was steady, resolute. "Tomorrow, I call the best pediatric cardiologist in the country. I schedule the surgery. I clear my calendar for the next 6 weeks. And I show up not as Lucas Valente billionaire, just as Dad. She turned to look at him. Really look. And for the first time in years, she saw not the man who left, but the man who might stay. But as the car turned onto her street, a quiet dread settled in her chest. Because hope was dangerous. Hope made you vulnerable, and she'd already been shattered once. Still, as he pulled up to her modest house, as he carefully carried Laura to the door, as he stood on her porch with moonlight in his eyes and his daughter in his arms, Isabel felt something stir inside her. Not trust, not yet, but the fragile, trembling possibility of healing. He handed Laura back to her at the threshold. Their fingers brushed. A spark. A memory. A question. "Thank you," he said. "For what?" Back in the kitchen, she poured herself a glass of water with shaking hands. The silence pressed in, thick with everything unsaid, everything undone. She replayed every word from the gala, every glance, every tremor in Lucas's voice. Was it real, or just another performance, polished for the moment? Her phone buzzed on the counter. A text. "Lucas." Dr. Chun confirmed. "Top pediatric cardiac surgeon. She'll see Laura Monday at 10 a.m. I've arranged for a car to pick you both up. Don't argue." Isabel stared at the screen. "No, please. No, if you're okay with it. Just certainty." The old Lucas would have assumed. The new one was trying to act. She typed back, fingers hovering. "We'll be ready." She didn't add thank you. Not yet. The next morning, Laura woke with wide eyes and a question already on her lips. "Is Daddy coming today?" Isabel knelt by her bed. "Not today, love, but he's helping us find the best doctor to make your heart strong." "Will he come to the doctor with us?" "I think he wants to." Laura smiled, clutching the music box to her chest. "I played it 3 times last night." Isabel's heart cracked open a little more. By Monday, the nerves were a live wire under her skin. She dressed Laura in her favorite yellow dress, the one with the tiny daisies, and braided her hair with careful hands. "You look beautiful," she whispered. "So do you, Mama." Isabel almost laughed. She wore the same navy sweater she'd had for years, hair pulled back, no makeup. But maybe that was the point. She wasn't here to impress. She was here to protect. The black town car arrived precisely at 9:45. The driver opened the door with a nod. Inside, Lucas waited. He wasn't in a suit, just dark jeans, a soft-looking sweater, no tie. He looked human. "Hi," he said softly as they got in. "Hi," Isabel replied. Laura beamed. "You came." He reached over and squeezed her hand. "Wouldn't miss it." The ride to the clinic was quiet, but not tense. Laura chattered about her stuffed rabbit, about the clouds that looked like dragons, about how the music box played, just like the stars. Lucas listened, really listened, asking questions, laughing at her jokes, his eyes never leaving her face. At the clinic, Dr. Chun was brisk but kind, her eyes sharp behind wire-rimmed glasses. She examined Laura thoroughly, listened to her heart with a stethoscope warmed in her hands, asked Isabel detailed questions about symptoms, sleep, energy levels. Then she turned to Lucas. "And you're the father?" "I am." "You've been involved in her care?" Isabel opened her mouth, but Lucas answered first. "Not as much as I should have been. But I'm here now, and I intend to be for every appointment, every decision, every step forward." Dr. Chun studied him for a long moment, then nodded. "Good, because she'll need both of you." She laid out the plan: surgery in 10 days. Minimally invasive, high success rate, but not without risk. Recovery would take weeks. Emotional support was as critical as medical care. Afterward, in the hallway, Isabel leaned against the wall, suddenly dizzy. Lucas noticed. "Hey!" He stepped closer, voice low. "Breathe." She closed her eyes. "What if something goes wrong?" "It won't," he said firmly. Then softer. "But if it does, we'll face it. Together." She looked at him, really looked. Saw the fear in his eyes too. The love. The determination. For For the first time, she believed he meant it. That evening, back at her house, Lucas didn't leave right away. He sat on the porch step while Isabel made tea, watching the sunset paint the sky in streaks of gold and violet. "I sold the penthouse," he said suddenly. Isabel paused, mug in hand. "What?" "I bought a place 10 minutes from here. 2 bedrooms, a backyard. Laura can have a swing set." He gave a small, self-deprecating smile. "Turns out I don't need 50 floors to feel tall." She sat beside him. "Vanessa won't like that." "She already left," he said quietly. "Took a vacation to St. Tropez with Marcus Thorne." Isabel didn't gloat. She just nodded. "I'm sorry. Don't be. It's better this way." He turned to her. "I don't expect us to be anything. Not yet. Maybe not ever. But I need you to know. I'm not doing this for redemption. I'm doing it because she's my daughter. And you're the only person who's ever loved her the way she deserves." Tears welled in Isabel's eyes. Not from sadness. From the terrifying, beautiful weight of being seen. Inside, Laura called out, "Mama? Daddy?" The music box stopped. Then came the night before the surgery. Rain fell in soft sheets against the windows, turning the streetlights into hazy halos. Laura was already in bed, but restless, her small hands clutching the edges of her blanket. Isabel sat beside her, stroking her hair. "I'm scared, Mama," Laura whispered. "I know, sweetheart, but the doctors are the best. And Daddy and I will be right there when you wake up. Will he hold my hand? Every second." Pause. Then, "Do you think he'll stay after?" Isabel's breath caught. "I think he wants to." Before she could say more, a knock sounded at the front door. Lucas stood on the porch, soaked, holding a paper bag and a small wrapped box. Rain dripped from his hair. "I brought soup," he said, voice rough, "and something for tomorrow." He followed her to Laura's room without being asked. When Laura saw him, her face lit up like dawn breaking through storm clouds. "Daddy!" He sat on the edge of her bed, brushing damp hair from her forehead. "Can't sleep, huh?" She shook her head. "My heart feels funny. It's just nervous," he said gently. "Mine is too." She blinked. "Yours?" "Yeah." He took her small hand in his. "Because I love you so much, and I want everything to go perfectly tomorrow." She studied his face. "Will you be there when I open my eyes?" "I'll be the first thing you see," he promised. "I swear." Then he handed her the wrapped box. She tore it open. Inside was a tiny plush star, soft and silver, with a little loop to tie onto a hospital wristband. "So you know I'm with you," he said. "Even when you can't see me." Laura hugged it tight. "Thank you, Daddy." Isabel watched, tears burning behind her eyes. This wasn't the man who'd walked out on them. This was someone new, someone forged in regret, yes, but also in love. After Laura finally drifted off, Lucas lingered in the hallway. Isabel handed him a towel for his hair. "You didn't have to come in this rain," she said. "I needed to," he replied. "I needed her to know I'm not disappearing again." Silence settled between them, heavy with everything unsaid. Then, quietly, Isabel asked, "What if she asks why you left? After the surgery, when she's older, what will you tell her?" He looked down, jaw tight. "The truth, that I was lost, that I thought success meant never needing anyone, that I was wrong, so devastatingly wrong, and that the moment I saw her on those stairs, I realized I'd thrown away the only thing that ever made me whole." Isabel's voice trembled. "And what about me? Will you tell her I waited? That I never stopped loving her, even when I hated you?" His eyes met hers, raw and open. "I'll tell her you were her hero, that you held her world together when mine fell apart." A tear slipped down her cheek. She didn't wipe it away. He reached out, slowly, as if asking permission, and brushed it away with his thumb. His touch was warm, real. "I don't expect forgiveness," he whispered, "but I'm asking for a chance to be the father she deserves, and maybe, someday, to earn back your trust." She looked at him, really looked, and saw not the tycoon, not the ghost of her past, but a man standing in the rain, offering his broken pieces in the hope they might still fit. "I don't know if I can trust you yet," she said honestly, "but I'll let you try." He nodded, eyes glistening. "That's all I ask." Later, as he left, he paused at the door. "Tomorrow, I'll be there at 6, before they take her in." "I know." He hesitated. "Isabel." "Yes. Thank you for letting me back in. Even just a little." She didn't answer with words. She just held his gaze until he turned and walked into the rain. That night, Isabel lay awake long after the storm passed, listening to Laura's St. Laura had been wheeled into surgery an hour ago. The last thing she'd done was press the silver plush star into Lucas's palm and whisper, "Hold this for me, Daddy, so you don't forget." He hadn't let go since. A nurse passed by, offering a weak smile. "They're doing great." Dr. Chun said everything's progressing as expected. Isabel nodded, but her stomach was a knot of dread. Expected didn't mean safe, and progressing didn't mean over. Lucas stopped pacing and sank into the chair beside her. He didn't speak, just sat, staring at the star in his hand like it was a lifeline. Then the double doors at the end of the hall swung open. Not a doctor, Vanessa. She stood there in a cream trench coat, heels sharp against the linoleum, eyes scanning the room until they landed on them. Her expression wasn't angry. It was colder than that, calculating. Isabel's breath hitched. "What are you doing here?" Vanessa ignored her, stepping straight toward Lucas. "I heard," she said, voice low, laced with false concern, "about the surgery. I came to see if you were holding up." He didn't look at her. "You shouldn't be here." "I have every right," she said, glancing pointedly at Isabel. "After all, we're still legally entangled. Contracts, shares, the Valente Foundation board. You can't just vanish and expect me to clean up your mess." Isabel stood slowly. "This isn't about business. This is about our daughter." "Your daughter," Vanessa corrected, voice dripping with venom. "Not his. Not really. He barely knew her name 6 months ago." Lucas finally looked up, eyes blazing. Don't what?" she challenged, stepping closer. "Speak the truth? You think showing up with flowers and a music box makes you a father? You left her. You chose me over them. And now that it's inconvenient, you're playing hero." Isabel's voice was quiet, but steel. "Get out, Vanessa." "No," Vanessa said, turning fully to her now. "You don't get to stand there like the saint while he abandons me the second things get hard. You knew what he was when you married him. Ambitious, ruthless. And now you act shocked he treated you the same way he treats everyone else." Isabel's chest burned, but she didn't flinch. "I'm not here for him. I'm here for her. And if you have any decency at all, you'll leave before she wakes up and sees the woman who tried to erase her from her father's life." Vanessa's mask cracked. "You think you've won? That he'll stay? Men like him don't change, Isabel. They get bored. They move on. And when he does, you'll be right back where you started. Alone with a child who asks why Daddy left again." Lucas stood abruptly, stepping between them. "Enough." His voice wasn't loud, but it carried the weight of finality. "You crossed a line," he said, eyes locked on Vanessa. "You don't get to come into the space, into her moment, and poison it with your bitterness. I made my choice. It's not about you. It never was." Vanessa's lips trembled. For a second, she looked human, hurt, exposed. Then she straightened, chin high. "Fine, but don't come crawling back when your little redemption arc collapses. Because it will." She turned on her heel and walked away, the click of her heels echoing like a countdown. Silence fell. Isabel sank back into her chair, trembling. Lucas sat beside her, the plush star still clutched in his hand. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "She shouldn't have come." Isabel shook her head. "She's not wrong about one thing." He looked at her, wary. "What?" "That you could leave again." Her voice broke. "And if you do, it won't just break my heart. It'll break hers." He reached for her hand, hesitated, then took it anyway. His grip was firm, grounding. "I won't." he said, voice thick with conviction. Because I finally understand. Love isn't a feeling you chase. It's a promise you keep. Even when it's hard. Even when you're scared. Especially then. Before she could respond, the surgical doors opened again. Dr. Chun stepped out, mask pulled down, eyes tired but calm. Isabel shot to her feet. How is she? Dr. Chun smiled, small but real. She's through. The procedure went perfectly. We'll move her to recovery in a few minutes. You can see her soon. Relief crashed over Isabel like a wave. She swayed, and Lucas caught her elbow, steadying her. But as they followed the doctor down the hall, Isabel's mind raced. The surgery was over. The danger had passed. But the real test was just beginning. Isabel stood at the foot of the bed, arms wrapped tightly around herself as if holding her own pieces together. Lucas sat beside his daughter, one hand resting lightly over hers, his thumb brushing her knuckles in a quiet, steady rhythm. He hadn't spoken in 20 minutes, hadn't moved, except to adjust the blanket when she shivered. Then her eyelids fluttered. Mama? Her voice was thin, drowsy, laced with the lingering fog of anesthesia. I'm here, baby, Isabel whispered, stepping closer, tears already spilling over. Laura turned her head slightly, searching. Daddy? Lucas leaned in, voice rough with emotion. Right here, Bug. I never left. A faint smile touched her lips. Did the stars watch over me? He swallowed hard. Every single one. She drifted again, but this time her fingers curled around his, holding on. Isabel watched them. The father and daughter reunited not in grandeur, but in the fragile intimacy of a hospital room, and something inside her cracked open, not with pain, but with possibility. Later, as nurses checked vitals and adjusted lines, Lucas stepped out into the hallway, running a hand over his face. He looked exhausted, hollowed out by fear and relief in equal measure. Isabel followed him. You should go home, she said softly. Rest. I'll stay with her. He shook his head. I'm not leaving. Lucas, you've been here since 5 a.m. You haven't eaten. You're running on fumes. And you haven't slept in days, he countered, turning to her. But you're still here. So am I. She looked away toward the window. I need to know this is real. That you're not doing this because you feel guilty or because it's the right thing to do. I need to know you want to be here. He stepped closer, voice low, urgent. Isabel, when I saw her on those stairs, holding your hand, wearing that little pink dress, I didn't just see my daughter. I saw everything I threw away, and I realized I didn't lose a wife. I lost a family, and I'd rather lose every dollar I own than lose her again. Her breath hitched. What about me? He hesitated, just a second, then said, I don't know what we are. Maybe we'll never be what we were. But I know I can't imagine a future where I'm not fighting for both of you. Before she could respond, his phone buzzed in his pocket. He ignored it. It buzzed again and again. Finally, he pulled it out. His expression darkened. What is it? Isabel asked. He showed her the screen, 3 missed calls, all from his CFO. A text beneath, emergency board meeting. Vanessa just filed an injunction to freeze Valente Holdings' assets pending review of fiduciary conduct. She's claiming you're emotionally compromised. Isabel's stomach dropped. She's using Laura's surgery against you? She's using everything, he said grimly. My divorce wasn't finalized. She still holds shares. And now she's weaponizing my absence from the office, my instability. Because you chose your daughter over a boardroom? Isabel finished, voice trembling with fury. She's punishing you for having a heart. He ran a hand through his hair. If the injunction goes through, the company could stall. Payroll, projects, even the foundation. It all freezes. And if I lose control, she'll dismantle everything I built, including the medical trust one set up for Laura's care. Panic clawed at Isabel's throat. So what do you do? He looked back through the window at Laura, still sleeping peacefully, unaware of the storm brewing outside her room. I go, he said quietly. I face them. I prove I'm not compromised. I'm awake. But you just got her back, Isabel whispered, tears welling again. What if they take you away from her again? He turned to her, eyes blazing with resolve. They won't, because this time, I'm not choosing between my empire and my family. I'm rebuilding the empire around my family. He took her hands in his warm, calloused, real. Stay with her. I'll be back before she wakes up again. And Isabel, no matter what happens in that boardroom, I'm coming back to this room. To you, to her. That's not a promise I'm making lightly. It's a vow. She searched his face. The lines of exhaustion, the fire beneath the fatigue. And for the first time, she saw not the tycoon, not the ghost of her past, but a man who had finally found his true north. Go, she said, squeezing his hands. Win. He kissed Laura's forehead, whispered something too soft to hear, then turned and walked down the hall, shoulders squared, jaw set. Isabel watched him go, heart pounding, because now the real battle had begun. Not in a hospital, but in a room full of men who measured worth in stock prices and power plays. And if Lucas lost, he wouldn't just lose his company. She's not my partner, Lucas snapped. She's a parasite who saw vulnerability and pounced. A murmur rippled through the room. Vanessa sat at the far end of the table, pristine in a tailored ivory suit, sipping espresso like she hadn't just tried to gut the man she once called the love of her life. She didn't look at him. She didn't have to. Her presence was a blade already buried. Let's be clear, she said smoothly, finally speaking. I'm not attacking Lucas. I'm protecting the company. His sudden, maternal instincts are admirable, but erratic. He liquidated prime assets to fund a child's surgery without consultation. What's next? Selling the downtown portfolio to buy her ballet lessons. Lucas's jaw tightened. That child is my daughter. And yes, I'd sell every building I own to keep her alive. Exactly, Vanessa said, turning to the board with a practiced smile. Sentiment over strategy. That's how empires fall. Harlan leaned forward. Lucas, we need assurance. Can you lead with your head, not your heart? For a heartbeat, Lucas was silent. He thought of Laura's hand in his, of the silver star she'd pressed into his palm, of Isabel's eyes, tired, wary, but still willing to hope. Then he spoke, voice low but resonant. You're asking the wrong question. The real question is, should I lead without my heart? Because the man who built Valente Holdings wasn't the one chasing headlines. He was the one who stayed up nights rewriting contracts so his wife could sleep. The one who skipped bonuses to keep staff employed during the crash. The one who believed success meant lifting others, not just himself. He looked around the table, meeting each pair of eyes. If that man is emotionally compromised, then I'm guilty. But if you think cold calculation is leadership, you've forgotten what built this company in the first place. Trust. And I've spent the last 3 months earning back the only trust that ever mattered, my daughters. Vanessa scoffed. Poetic. But poetry doesn't pay dividends. No, Lucas said, stepping toward her. But integrity does. And you know what you lack, Vanessa? Not shares. Not influence. Soul. You saw a family in crisis and saw an opportunity. That's not business. That's betrayal. She stood, eyes flashing. Don't pretend you're the victim. You walked away from her first. I did, he admitted, voice raw. And I'll spend the rest of my life making up for it. But you never loved anyone but yourself. The room went still. Harlan cleared his throat. We'll recess for 30 minutes. Vote reconvenes at noon. As the board filed out, Lucas remained, staring out the window at the city below. The same view he'd once thought proved he'd won. Now it just felt empty. His phone buzzed. A text from Isabel. She woke up asking for you. She's okay. Strong. But she's scared you won't come back. His chest ached. He typed back. Tell her I'm fighting for us. I'll be there before dinner. He hit send, then turned to find Vanessa still in the room, leaning against the wall, arms crossed. You really think they'll side with you? She asked, voice quieter now, stripped of performance. I don't care, he said, because even if I lose everything in this room, I've already found what I was missing." She looked at him, really looked, and for the first time her mask slipped completely. "I thought you'd choose me," she whispered. "I thought power was what you wanted." "I did," he said gently. "Until I realized it meant nothing without someone to share." He paused outside her room, taking a breath. Through the glass panel, he saw Isabel sitting beside the bed, reading softly from a worn copy of Goodnight Moon. Laura's eyes were half closed, but she was listening, her small fingers tracing the edge of the silver plush star resting on her chest. Then Laura turned her head and saw him, her face lit up like sunrise breaking through storm clouds. "Daddy!" The single word unraveled something deep inside him. He pushed the door open. Isabel looked up, relief flickering in her eyes before she masked it with quiet reserve. "You made it. I told you I would," he said, stepping closer. Laura held out her arms. "Come sit." He did, carefully, as if she were made of glass. But she wasn't fragile, she was fierce. She grabbed his hand and pressed it over her chest, right where her heart beat beneath the bandages. "Feel it?" she whispered. "It's strong now." He closed his eyes, feeling the steady, resilient rhythm beneath his palm. "Yeah, Bug, it's the strongest heart I know." Isabel watched them, arms crossed, but her expression had softened. "She asked for you every hour after you left." "I know," he said, not looking away from Laura. "I'm sorry I couldn't be here sooner." "You were fighting," Laura said matter-of-factly, as if she understood more than she let on. "Mama said you were fighting for us." He swallowed hard. "I was." Isabel stood, smoothing her sweater. "I'll give you two a few minutes. She hasn't eaten much. I'll see if the cafeteria has that strawberry yogurt she likes." As she left, Lucas leaned closer. "How are you really feeling?" "Tired," Laura admitted, "but happy, because you came back." He kissed her forehead. "I'm not going anywhere." She yawned, eyelids drooping. "Will you stay until I fall asleep?" "Every night," he promised. "For as long as you need me." She smiled, already drifting. "Even when I'm big?" "Especially then." He stayed, holding her hand, watching her breathe, until her grip loosened in sleep. When Isabel returned, she found him still there, head bowed, shoulders finally relaxed. "She's asleep," he murmured. Isabel set the yogurt on the bedside table. "You look like you haven't slept in days." "I haven't," he admitted. "But I don't need to. Not when I finally know what matters." She hesitated, then sat in the chair across from him. "Vanessa really tried to take everything from you." "She tried," he said, "but she didn't understand. The only thing I care about keeping is this." He nodded toward Laura. "And you?" Isabel looked down at her hands. "I don't know how to do this, Lucas." Again. "I'm not asking for you yet," he said gently. "I'm asking for a chance to be in the same room, to share a meal, to sit beside you while our daughter heals. That's enough for now." She met his eyes. "What if I'm still angry?" "Then be angry," he said. "Yell at me. Cry. I deserve it. But don't shut me out of her life. Please." A tear slipped down her cheek. She didn't wipe it away. "I've spent so long protecting her from you. I forgot she needed you too." "She does," he whispered. "And so do you. Not the man I was, but the one I'm trying to become." Silence settled between them. Not heavy, but soft, like the space between heartbeats. Then, from the bed, Laura murmured in her sleep, "Mama, Daddy, don't go." They both reached for her at the same time, their hands brushing over the blanket. Neither pulled away. Outside, the city hummed on, indifferent to the quiet revolution happening in Lucas came every morning before dawn, often with fresh pastries from the bakery Laura loved, and stayed long after visiting hours ended, sleeping in the stiff armchair beside her bed, his coat draped over his shoulders like a shield against the cold weight of his past. But it was the night before her discharge that everything shifted. Isabel had just tucked Laura in, smoothing the blanket around her shoulders, when the girl looked up with those wide, knowing eyes. "Mama," she said softly. Will Daddy come to our house now? Isabel froze. She glanced toward the doorway, where Lucas stood silently, having just arrived with a new book, The Little Prince, Laura's favorite. He hadn't heard the question, but Isabel's silence spoke volumes. Later, in the dim glow of the hallway, she found him leaning against the wall, staring out the window at the city lights. She asked if you'd come home, Isabel said, voice barely above a whisper. He turned, eyes shadowed but alert. And what did you tell her? I didn't know what to say. He nodded slowly. I've been staying in the apartment I bought, the one 10 minutes from you. I haven't even unpacked most of it. Keep thinking, what if she doesn't want me there? What if you don't? Isabel crossed her arms, not in defense, but to hold herself together. It's not about what I want, Lucas. It's about what's stable for her. She's been through so much. I can't let her attach to you only for you to disappear again. I won't disappear, he said, stepping closer. But I also won't force my way in. I'll wait, however long it takes. She looked at him, really looked, and saw the exhaustion, the humility, the quiet determination that hadn't been there before. You've changed. I had to, he said simply, because the man I was didn't deserve her. And he certainly didn't deserve you. A silence stretched between them, filled only by the distant hum of the hospital at night. Then softly, Isabel said, come by tomorrow, after she's settled. Just for dinner. Nothing fancy. Soup, bread, her favorite apple slices. His breath caught. You're inviting me in. I'm giving you a chance to prove you belong there, she corrected gently. Not as a guest, but as her father. He nodded, eyes glistening. I'll be there. The next evening, Isabel's small kitchen smelled of rosemary and simmering broth. Laura sat at the table, coloring with renewed energy, her hospital wristband still on her arm, a badge of survival. When the doorbell rang, she dropped her crayon and ran. Lucas stood on the porch, holding a potted rosemary plant. For your garden, he said, smiling nervously. Laura threw her arms around his waist. You came. I told you I would, he said, hugging her back like he never wanted to let go. Inside, Isabel watched from the kitchen doorway, heart pounding. This wasn't a gala. There were no cameras, no scripts, no audience. Just a man, a woman, and a child trying to rebuild something broken in the most ordinary of settings. At the table, Lucas helped Laura cut her bread, listened intently as she recounted her hospital adventures, and laughed at her silly jokes. He didn't dominate the conversation. He didn't perform. He just was. After dinner, as Laura played with her music box in the living room, Isabel stood at the sink, washing dishes. Lucas joined her, rolling up his sleeves. You don't have to do that, she said. I know, he replied, taking a plate from her hands. But I want to. They worked in silence for a while. The clink of porcelain, the rush of warm water, the soft melody from the other room weaving around them like a promise. Then, quietly, he said, Thank you for letting me in. She didn't look at him. Don't thank me yet. This is just dinner. I know, he said, but it's a start. She finally turned, drying her hands on a towel. Lucas, if you stay, it can't be part-time. Can't be when it's convenient. It has to be every day. The hard days, the boring days, the days when she's sick or angry or doesn't want to talk. Are you ready for that? He met her gaze steady, sure. I've been waiting my whole life to be ready. Tears welled in her eyes. But this time, they weren't from fear. They were from hope, fragile and fierce. In the living room, Laura's voice floated in, sweet and clear. Daddy, will you stay for the whole night? He looked at Isabel, question in his eyes. She took a breath, then nodded. Just tonight, she said. On the couch. He smiled, small, grateful. That's all I need. Orc with takeout and tired eyes that still lit up when Laura ran to the door. Isabel watched. She waited. She let herself hope, just a little, without letting go of the armor she'd worn for so long. Then came the night of Laura's first post-surgery checkup. The cardiologist's office was bright and sterile, but the news was golden. Her heart is healing beautifully. No complications. She can return to school next week. Laura beamed, swinging her legs from the exam table. Does this mean I can run now? Slowly, the doctor said with a smile. But yes, your heart is strong. In the car on the way home, Laura chattered nonstop, already planning a welcome-back party for her stuffed animals. Isabel sat in the passenger seat, relief washing over her like warm rain. Lucas glanced at her, then at Laura in the rearview mirror. She's going to be okay, he said softly. Isabel nodded. She always was. She just needed us to believe it. That evening, after Laura was in bed, Isabel stood on the back porch, wrapped in a thin sweater, watching the last light fade over the neighbor's fence. The air smelled of damp earth and jasmine, spring pushing through winter's remains. Lucas joined her, holding 2 mugs of tea. You've been quiet. I'm just thinking, she said, taking the mug, about how close we came to losing her, and how easily I could have lost you forever. He leaned against the railing beside her. You didn't lose me. I walked away. And now you're back, she said, turning to him. But why? Really? Is it guilt? Redemption? Or is it her? He didn't look away. It's all of it. But mostly, it's you. Her breath caught. Me? You were the compass I ignored, he said, voice rough with honesty. Even when I thought I was chasing success, I was chasing the feeling I had when I came home to you. When you'd look at me like I was more than my bank account, like I was yours. She looked down at her hands. I don't know how to trust that. I know, he said gently. So don't trust me yet. Trust my actions. I'll keep showing up, every day, until you do. A silence settled between them, filled only by the distant chirp of crickets. Then, from inside, Laura called out, Mama? Daddy? I had a dream. They exchanged a look, half amused, half awed, and went inside together. But the real turning point came 3 nights later. Isabel woke to the sound of soft crying. She rushed to Laura's room, heart pounding, only to find Lucas already there, sitting on the edge of the bed, holding Laura as she sobbed into his chest. It's okay, Bug, he murmured, stroking her hair. I've got you. Isabel hovered in the doorway, unseen. I dreamed my heart broke again, Laura whispered. And you weren't there. I'm here, he said firmly. And I'm not going anywhere. Not ever. Isabel's eyes burned. She turned away before they could see her cry. The next morning, over coffee, she found him in the kitchen, already making pancakes. Slightly burnt, but shaped like stars. She had a nightmare, he said without looking up. I know, Isabel replied softly. Thank you for being there. He finally met her eyes. I meant what I said. I'm not leaving. She took a breath, then said the words she'd held back for months. Then stop sleeping on the couch. He froze, spatula in hand. What? You heard me? She said, voice trembling but clear. There's a guest room. It's clean. It's yours, if you want it. He set the spatula down slowly. Isabel, are you sure? I'm not sure of anything, she admitted. But I'm tired of being afraid. And she needs you here. Really here. He stepped closer, stopping just short of touching her. And what about you? Do you need me here? She looked into his eyes, the same eyes that once looked through her, now filled with a quiet, steady love, and whispered, Maybe I do. That night, for the first time in years, Lucas didn't leave. He didn't sleep in the guest room right away. He stayed up late with Isabel on the porch, talking, really talking about everything. The pain, the mistakes, the dreams they'd buried. He apologized not with grand words, but with the raw honesty of a man who finally saw what he'd broken. And Isabel? She didn't forgive him all at once, but she let him stay, because healing wasn't a single moment. It was 1,000 small choices, to listen, to show up, to believe that love once written her in every decision that mattered. Isabel watched him from the doorway, coffee steaming in her hands. He hadn't shaved. His sweater was slightly wrinkled, He looked less like a tycoon and more like a man who'd finally found something worth staying for. "You don't have to do all that," she said softly. He looked up, eyes tired but clear. "Yes, I do. Because if anything ever happens to me, I need to know she's protected, not just financially, but by you. By your judgment, your love, your strength." She sat across from him, tracing the rim of her mug. "You're really letting go of the old life, aren't you?" "I'm not letting go," he said, setting down his pen. "I'm choosing what was always mine to keep." Just then, Laura bounded in, still in pajamas, hair wild, clutching her music box. "Daddy, Mama, look, I fixed it." She opened the lid, and the familiar tune of Twinkle, Twinkle played, slightly off-key but whole again. Lucas smiled. "How'd you do that, Bug?" "I used tape and love," she declared proudly. Isabel laughed, a real, unguarded sound, and Lucas's chest tightened at the sound of it. It had been so long. Later that afternoon, as Laura napped, Isabel found Lucas in the backyard, kneeling in the dirt, planting the rosemary he'd brought weeks ago. His hands were stained with soil, his sleeves rolled up to his elbows. "You're really staying," she said, not as a question, but as a quiet realization. He looked up, wiping his brow with the back of his hand. "I signed the papers this morning, finalized the divorce, transferred full control of the foundation to a new board, led by people who care about impact, not optics. And I stepped down as CEO." Her eyes widened. "You what?" "I'm still on the board, but I'm not running the show anymore," he said, standing. "I hired a new CEO, someone brilliant, ethical, and, most importantly, someone who doesn't need me hovering. I'll consult, advise, but my days of 80-hour weeks are over." "Why?" she whispered. "Because I missed her first steps," he said, voice thick. "Her first word, her first day of school. I won't miss her first bike ride, her first heartbreak, her graduation. I've spent my life building a legacy in steel and glass. Now I want one in bedtime stories and scraped knees and 'I love you' said without an audience." Tears welled in Isabel's eyes. "You're really doing this for us." "For me," he corrected gently. "Because I finally understand. I wasn't lost because I left you. I was lost because I forgot who I was when I was with you." She stepped closer, close enough to see the flecks of green in his eyes, the lines of regret and resolve etched around them. "What now?" "Now," he said, taking her hand, slowly, giving her space to pull away. "I keep showing up, not as Lucas Valente, billionaire, just as Lucas, Laura's dad. And, if you'll let me, the man who's trying to earn back your heart." She didn't answer with words. Instead, she turned his hand over and pressed her palm against his, fingers interlacing like roots finding soil after a long drought. Inside, Laura's voice called out, "Mama? Daddy?" The music box stopped again. They both laughed, soft, shared, real, and walked back inside together. That evening, as the three of them sat on the porch watching fireflies blink in the dusk, Isabel leaned her head against Lucas's shoulder, just for a moment, and felt something she hadn't in years: peace. Laura thrived. Her laughter filled the house like sunlight, her heart strong, her spirit unbroken. She started school again, came home with drawings of my family. Always three figures now, two tall, one small, holding hands under a sun that never set. But healing wasn't just happening in Laura. One rainy afternoon, Isabel sat at the kitchen table, grading papers from her new after-school literacy program, a modest venture she'd launched in the community center, teaching kids to read through stories and song. She hadn't returned to her old university post. She didn't need to. This was where she belonged. Lucas came in, shaking water from his coat, holding a dripping grocery bag. "Got the strawberries," he said, setting them on the counter. "The organic ones Laura likes." She smiled faintly. "You remembered." "I remember everything now," he said softly. He sat across from her, watching as she underlined a sentence in red pen. "You're happy here," he observed, not as a question, but as a quiet awe. "I am," she admitted, looking up. "Not because everything's perfect, but because it's real. No masks, no performances, just us." He reached across the table, his fingers brushing hers. "Do you ever think about the gala? That night on the stairs?" "Every day," she said, "because it was the night I stopped hoping and started fighting." He nodded. "And I finally saw what I'd thrown away." A silence settled between them, warm and easy, no longer charged with suspicion, but with something deeper, understanding. Later that week, Laura came home from school with a crumpled permission slip. "Field trip to the planetarium," she announced, eyes shining. "Daddy, will you come? Mama said she has class." Lucas knelt, smoothing the paper. "Of course I'll come, bug." But that night, Isabel found him on the porch, staring at his phone, jaw tight. "What's wrong?" she asked. He showed her an email, formal, cold. From Vanessa's legal team, a final settlement offer. She was relinquishing all claims to Valente Holdings, in exchange for one condition. Lucas would never publicly speak of her role in the boardroom coup. No interviews, no memoirs. Silence in exchange for peace. "She's trying to erase herself," Isabel said quietly. "Or protect what's left of her reputation," he replied. "But I don't care about her anymore. I don't want Laura to grow up thinking her father was a man who traded truth for convenience." Isabel sat beside him. "Then don't. But you don't have to shout it from the rooftops either. Just live differently. That's the loudest answer." He looked at her, really looked, and saw not the woman he'd left behind, but the woman who'd taught him how to stay. The day of the field trip, Lucas stood among a crowd of parents in the planetarium's dim blue light, holding Laura's hand as constellations bloomed across the dome above them. She leaned into him, whispering, "That one's ours, Daddy. The bright one." "Why's that?" he asked. "Because it never goes out," she said simply. Afterward, as they walked back to the car, Isabel waited by the curb, holding 2 hot chocolates. She'd canceled her class, just this once. Lucas saw her and smiled. A real, unguarded smile that reached his eyes. "You came," he said. "I did," she replied, handing him a cup. "Because some things are more important than work." Laura tugged his sleeve. "Mama, tell Daddy about your new student." Isabel laughed. "His name's Mateo. He just read his first full book yesterday. The Very Hungry Caterpillar. He cried when it ended." Lucas watched her, her eyes bright, her hands gesturing with quiet passion, and felt something settle deep in his chest. This was what he'd been chasing all along. Not power, not applause, but this, her joy, their daughter's wonder, the quiet miracle of an ordinary life lived with love. That night, as Laura slept, Isabel stood at the window, watching the moon cast silver light over the backyard where Lucas had planted a small garden. Rosemary, lavender, and wildflowers Laura had picked from the park. He came up behind her, not touching, just present. "What are you thinking? That I used to believe love was something you found once and held forever," she said softly. "But now I know, it's something you choose, every single day." He stepped closer, his breath warm against her hair. "Then let me keep choosing you." She turned, finally meeting his eyes. And in that look, no words, no promises, just presence was everything. One evening, as fireflies blinked in the backyard, Laura ran up to her with a handmade card. "For your book, Mama." Isabel opened it. Inside, in wobbly letters, "My mama is brave. She fixes hearts with words." Tears pricked her eyes. "Did you draw this all by yourself?" Laura nodded proudly. "Daddy helped me spell brave." Isabel looked toward the porch, where Lucas sat grading Laura's math homework, something he'd insisted on doing himself. "So I know where she's struggling." He caught her gaze and smiled, that slow, steady smile that no longer carried the weight of performance, only presence. Later, after Laura was in bed, Isabel found him in the kitchen washing dishes, his nightly ritual as if to say, "I belong here, in the mess and the mundane." "She called you brave," he said softly, not turning. "She's right." Isabel leaned against the counter. I don't feel brave. I just kept going. That's what bravery is, he said, turning off the faucet and drying his hands. Not the absence of fear, just the choice to move forward anyway. She watched him. The way his sleeves were rolled up, the way his hair had grown slightly longer, the calm in his movements. This wasn't the man who'd once commanded boardrooms with a glance. This was a man who'd learned to listen, to wait, to love without needing to control. You've changed too, she said. He met her eyes. You gave me a reason to. She stepped closer. I didn't give you anything. You chose it. Because you showed me what was worth choosing, he said, voice rough with emotion. A silence settled between them, warm and full. Then, from the living room, Laura's voice floated in, sleepy but insistent. Mama? Daddy? Can you read me a story? Together, they exchanged a look, half amused, half awed, and walked in hand. That night, they sat on either side of her bed, reading The Little Prince aloud, alternating pages. Laura drifted off between them, one hand in Isabel's, the other in Lucas's, the music box playing softly on her nightstand. After she slept, Isabel lingered in the doorway, watching Lucas tuck the blanket around Laura's shoulders, brush a kiss to her forehead. He turned and saw her. She's everything, isn't she? She's the reason we're here, Isabel whispered. He stepped into the hallway, closing the door softly behind him. And what about us? Are we still figuring it out? She looked at him, really looked, and saw not the ghost of her past pain, but the man who'd stayed through the storm. I think we're more than figuring it out, Lucas. I think we're building something new, not the same as before, better. He reached for her hand. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if I'd never left? Every day, she admitted. But then I remember, maybe we needed to break to learn how to truly hold each other. He pulled her close, just enough to feel her heartbeat against his chest. I don't want to waste another second. She rested her head on his shoulder, breathing in the scent of soap and summer air. Then don't. Outside, the world kept turning. Cities rose and fell, fortunes shifted. People loved, then Lucas slid into the seat beside her, slightly out of breath, hair damp from the summer rain that had just passed. Made it, he whispered, offering a small, apologetic smile. Traffic was hell. She squeezed his hand. You're here. That's all that matters. The lights dimmed, a hush fell, and there she was, Laura, standing center stage in a silver cape, her voice clear and steady as she began. Once, a little star fell from the sky and forgot how to shine. Isabel's breath caught. She glanced at Lucas. His eyes were already wet. As Laura spoke of the star's journey, lost, afraid, but never alone. Isabel remembered that night at the gala, the grand staircase, the moment she'd stood there holding her daughter's hand like a shield against a world that had discarded them. She'd thought it was the lowest point, but now she saw it was the turning point, because that star didn't need to be rescued. She just needed someone to remind her she was still light. When the play ended, the audience erupted in applause. Laura beamed, scanning the crowd. Then her eyes locked on them. She waved, radiant. Afterward, in the hallway lined with finger-painted posters and glittery crafts, Laura ran to them, cape askew, cheeks flushed. Did you like it? It was perfect, Lucas said, kneeling to hug her. You were the brightest star in the whole sky, even brighter than the real ones? She asked, eyes wide. Especially, he whispered. Isabel watched them, her chest full to bursting. This ordinary miracle of a child who'd faced surgery, fear, and uncertainty, and still chose to shine, was everything. As they walked to the car, Laura chattering about her friends and the cupcakes they'd eaten, Lucas fell into step beside Isabel. The rain had stopped, leaving the air clean and cool, the streets glistening under streetlights. She's amazing, he said softly. She is, Isabel replied. And she's ours. He stopped walking, turned to her. Isabel, I've been thinking. She looked up at him, heart skipping. About what? He took both her hands in his touch warm. Sure, I don't want to just live here. I want to build a life with you. Not because of guilt. Not because of Laura, though she's the best thing we've ever made together. But because I love you. Still. Always. Her breath trembled. Lucas? I know I broke us, he said, voice thick. But I've spent every day since trying to prove I can be the man you deserve. Not perfect. Just present. Just yours. Tears spilled down her cheeks. But she didn't look away. You've shown me, Lucas. Every day. In 1,000 quiet ways. So, is there a chance? He asked, hope raw in his eyes. For us? Really? She reached up, cupping his face. The same face that once looked through. Her, now filled with nothing but love and longing. We're not going back, she said gently. But maybe we can go forward. Together. He pulled her into his arms, holding her like she was the only solid thing in a spinning world. And maybe she was, just as he was for her. Later that night, after Laura was asleep, they sat on the porch, shoulders touching, watching the real stars blink awake in the velvet sky. She called me Daddy today without hesitating, Lucas said, voice soft with wonder. Like it was always true. Because it was, Isabel said. You just had to choose to believe it. He turned to her, took her hand, and pressed something into her palm. She opened it. It was her wedding band. The one she'd kept hidden in a drawer for years. Too painful to wear, too precious to throw away. I had it cleaned, he said. Not to ask you to wear it, just to give it back. Because you never lost your worth when I walked away. You were always whole. She looked at the ring, then at him. This man who'd once traded love for illusion, now offering his heart with nothing but humility. I'll wear it, she said quietly. Not because I'm taking back the past, but because I'm saying yes to our future. He kissed her then, not with passion but with promise. A kiss that tasted of rain, of second chances, of a love that had been broken, buried, and somehow, against all odds, had grown back.